hear me grind. Take down the film watchers and nerds all at once. I am one.
I keep thinking that's longer. I'm sorry. So, hey, YouTube, how you doing? Just a lonely nerd talking to you about football. Sound cool? Yeah, we're just running through player profiles. Kind of first look where through learning how not to suck as bad at YouTube, it's been suggested I look at data and work spreadsheets live instead of recording it before I'm playing it, and so that's why we get the big screen at the start. So this is a little awkward, but yeah, it's just me. It's a really big screen. I don't like it. I've got the hat on still to fully complete the homeless look. Yeah, I don't like it. Let's go back to the other one. I don't like it at all. Sorry. There you go, Tiny Me. I like Tiny Me better. Yeah, who are we talking about today? Randall Stevenson, another Oklahoma player. We've ran through Oklahoma a little bit through a few other rookie previews. So yeah, I'm going to just take kind of a first look at Randall Stevenson's stats. I'm not pretending I don't know who he is. Like, I talked with him with Travis May from RotoViz. I just did a whole rookie combine thing with him in which Travis, it was a podcast, I should probably clarify that. Yeah, for the entire thing, Travis May would be heroes, the teams, and all the research that I've done on the players who are just about to go to this pro day. So what are you hoping to see for their pro day? And to which I was like, nothing. That was pretty much the entire podcast, because I don't use a lot of combine stuff, but still, Travis was really informative and fun, and I like to be the butt of the joke, and Travis is good at making jokes about me, so I think it went pretty well. Check it out. So yeah, Travis told me a little about Stevenson. I read a little bit, read a couple of film reviews, read just a background history in a few places of where he's coming from. So how about we just start off there? What do I know of Randall Stevenson? And let's go look at his stats. He's a really big guy. That's what I know. I could put numbers on it, but no combine. Oh no, I can't put combine numbers on it. So we're just going to have to stick with big. He's a big guy. Yeah, he's like over 220, over 230 pounds-ish, 6 foot plus. Just imagine a monster, right? Yeah, a really big guy. Fits the mold of a rushing running back, you know. Just from what I know of him, that's what he is, like a big bruising running back. That's kind of the way he's described. I know he was pretty productive at high school, was an under-recruited high schooler, partly because of some not greatness in his last year or so. He ended up suffering some problems, and that led to his grades dropping below where they needed to be for him to be eligible. Took a year off and ended up playing for a JUCO school in Las Vegas, I believe. So I kind of like this guy. I actually kind of like, not that I try to ignore, I don't know these people. I don't know which personal struggle is the best indication of character traits. But just reading through what he's gone through, I don't know. I literally don't know. But I don't know. I don't know, but I don't know. Did you notice that? That was pretty cool. That was smooth. That's professional content right there. No, but he had to take a year off. He took a year off after, losing his eligibility and finishing high school that way. Collecting himself, came back, applied to school, which must have been mostly on his own, or family backing, or maybe there's still someone in the industry helping him out, but that seems like a go-getter, goes to Vegas, which isn't the best place to play in JUCO, particularly. It's really interesting talking to Travis off air, actually, because he was talking about the funnel, essentially, towards the NFL, because we've been talking about, on these videos, and also in my regular content on the Dynasty Crossroads podcast and for articles for DLF, I've been talking a lot about how NFL has bias towards certain conferences and towards certain teams and certain conferences. And there's really no reason for them to think that's where the best place to get players from, because once you adjust for draft capital, that's just not really true that these teams or these conferences are producing the majority of the best players, really. But they have, and we do too. You want to go look. You have to start somewhere. So where are the good players? Oh, they're over here. So I'll go watch these players with the assumption that they're good, and try to find out as much as I can. So you have to start somewhere. And talking to Travis, he was talking about how that's like exaggerated to the extreme for high school. And you can imagine how many high schools there are in the US and how many states. 50, Pete. Jeez. And all these players playing at him, and he hadn't run the exact numbers, but he essentially suggested, it's around 30, 40 high schools in the entire US account for about 90% of the players that go on to play college at all. So you've got that funnel starting really early. And that's interesting to think about with him going to, I don't know how well like that is for a JUCO school, but I can't remember a lot of players going and playing at a Vegas JUCO. I think it was Vegas. But either way, he didn't do much his first year, and his sophomore year, his true sophomore year, I believe, in that JUCO school, he just blitzed him. Like over 2,000 yards, 16 touchdowns, was a monster that his physical seemed to suggest he is. He just ran over everyone, had an incredibly productive year, which we don't need to talk about too much. Trying to use JUCO stats against other college stats I found to be difficult. You can use them to highlight good players in that situation, but using that then to compare them to NFL, it was unfortunately not something I liked adding to my database. You lost a lot of signal trying it, and that's why a lot of undrafted free agents either have no stats or lower stats, and some others as well, like David Johnson and James Robinson from last year, where I'm not collecting those more ancillary stats because they're not really that comparable, unfortunately. But anyway, I've done that. But either way, he was impressive enough that they had immediate interest with him at the FFB level, and got eligibility, and was eventually taken by Oklahoma. He wasn't running back one anything in his first year. He had to stick on the roster, and you can go look at the Trey Sermon rookie video for an understanding what else was going on that team, because Trey Sermon was there and then Kenny Brooks. But he did take over in his final year in 2020. Unfortunately, in 2020, they only played 6 games. So, yeah, there's this signal of him getting a knockback, and then for himself going out to find another opportunity, finding it, and then getting a setback, and that's followed him all the way to NFL draft eligibility. He did enough last year that he felt comfortable declaring, at least. That's positive. And we'll look at his stats in a minute to see what we think of him. But, it's worth noting he hasn't had a clear run, and I kind of like it. I mean, I don't actually know. Maybe there are a bunch of reasons why that can happen. If that, you could say if the common denominator is always you, maybe it's you that's got a problem. But personally, I see a guy constantly overcoming things. I would note that one of the things he got set back for, he and another player in college, once he moved from JUCO, got suspended for a particular kind of drug use, performance enhancing. That's not good. Monster JUCO year and all. I don't know. I imagine it's a lot more prevalent than we know for sure, and I really don't know the extent or how much. And he did come back and was never suspended again from it, so, just a thing to put in the old memory bank, I guess. Because really, outside of judgment, I don't know, it does a lot for our understanding of if they're going to be good NFL players, so I'm leaving it alone. Alright, and that's my understanding of who Randall Stevenson is. A really big guy who's overcome a lot of setbacks, some because of his own personal decision, and some just because life happens, it seems. But he's constantly come back to try again and worked at and actually achieved another opportunity, and I kind of like that in a player. We've seen lots of players make their own opportunities to force their way into the NFL. I mean, I think it's positive overall in that way. But yeah, let's take a look. Let's go to the even bigger screen where I'm even smaller, and that's my favorite screen. Because I'm up here. Top corner, do you see me? Okay, now stop seeing me. Cool. Rhonda Stevenson, let's take a quick look here. And really I really haven't dug into him a lot, but he's coming up fairly low in the 2021 class. How many players in this? This is sorted by pre-draft model. It's like 17th. But I wouldn't put a lot of stock in that. Again, you can see that where he came from, Oklahoma, and the Big 12. The NFL drafts from there. 3% draft rate doesn't sound like a lot, and we really have to come up with a better way of doing that, because that's since 2000. A lot of conferences have only started recently, and some have stopped, so it's not exactly a fair number. But I do know, having a look at the conference rates in the conference tab over here, and in your version of it, linked on my pinned to my Twitter timeline and stuff, 3% is actually not that particularly low, because it tends to be one conference and then two conference and then single digits after that for most of these. Again, talking about the biases the NFL seems to have is an interesting way of seeing where people are getting opportunity from and how much opportunity matters. But anyway, I've done that bit for this rate. It hits at a fairly high rate for a lower draft rate. Like 8% of players that have come from this conference have gone on to have drafted with first 3-round draft pick, and have gone on to have a top 24 season, at least one. I've got a little age adjustment, age adjusted draft hit rates. So basically the average of all the hit rates I have for a player with those breakout ages and that draft capital. Obviously this class doesn't have draft capital yet, and I haven't really dug in a lot to the breakout ages of running backs. Obviously it's already kind of skewed with Randall Stevenson because he's taken a slightly unusual path into Oklahoma anyway, so we wouldn't weight it too heavily. But honestly, 16% isn't terrible. It's better than Josh Johnson down here or Demeric Felton. So yeah, and obviously his conference is helping him out with that a little bit, because it's also the hit rate of the conference is built into it. Across 3 different levels of production, but I don't know who I'm waving to over here. I meant to do this, and I did this. Tiny camera, you know. Anyway, let's take a brief look at his stats. These are his counting stats, so they're meaningless, but it's good to get a background. Again, we only have 1 year that he played more than 6 games, so his main year actually doesn't even count for most adjusted metrics that I'm using, because I like a player to play at least 6 games before I start using their stats at all for anything. 28 receptions kind of sucks, but this is actually something I expect to see, because I mean he played 1 season as not the lead back, when pretty much running back opportunity funnels really to 1 or 2 guys, mostly 1 guy, especially at college. So you're not going to get a lot of touches in that first year if you're not the running back 1 or 2, and you've just stepped on the team for a JUCO team. So 28, I don't know, but it doesn't seem particularly low. 193 touches overall. Yeah, that's the running back work. That's a workhorse kind of load, right? But that's probably both years' stats being pulled in there, because this year's played column is just so I have an easy reference to how many years we've got to actually use in data, rather than directly responding to these other columns here. I should probably note that in here. Anyway, 1,478 yards. Neat. We don't care about counting stats much, but it's nice to know. That's 7.7 yards per touch is interesting. It's not particularly predictive, but I do like to get a sense of how efficient they were on a per touch basis throughout their entire career. Just 7.7 is high, but he's only played 1 significant year, and so on and so forth, so it should all be taken into account, I guess. 19 games. Neat. Never crossed the Zach Reed prime meridian, or the Zach Reed rule. Never had 20. Those 28 receptions are divided in a way that he didn't get 20 in one particular season. Yeah, that's possible. 1.5 receptions per game if you take all of his games and divide his receptions between them. Neat. College dominator is obviously a little low, where he's only played 1 season, and it was limited to 6 games last year, I should mention, because of COVID and the various problems around the 2020 season, not because the whole team just decided to quit or nothing. So yeah, that's why it's all looking a little low. Alright, let's just take a glance over here. I like this position opportunities for running back, just to get a sense of how many touches he's gotten. There's not a lot of high marks here. Like, running backs in their best in the last years are averaging like 66% and 72% of the positional touches. I do remember Oklahoma has kind of more of a split digging back through the years. Anyway, so maybe that's the reason, but yeah, that's a low positional opportunity. Can I just, let's go take a look at Oklahoma specifically. I was wondering who else has come from here. You know, how do you spell Oklahoma? Okay. All right, Oklahoma, not Oklahoma State. All right, it's been a while since they spent a draft pick there. 2017, Joe Mixon, who's had a lot of problems, hasn't really lived up to the potential of his profile, to be fair. Samaje Perine, okay, shout out to Kyle LeBrec from the Dynasty Dummies podcast. He's a big fan. I never really liked him. Damian Williams, he's been a lot better than we thought he would be as an undrafted free agent, because they matter. But anyway. Then you've got DeMarco Murray in the past, back when it was the Big 12 South at least. And before that, Adrian Peterson. It's been a little while. It's been a little while for Oklahoma since they produced an elite running back. But there's a pedigree there. The team has had good running backs. That's interesting to know. And not in recent history, not since they've been the Big 12 instead of the Big 12 South, for example. All right, let's take a brief walk through the stats here. Not overly concerned with these counting stats. We've already done as much counting stats as we care to. Yeah, I get 33% of rushing yards is just weird for a potential running back. Like, that's second year, partial season. 25% of all rushing opportunities. That's something I want to check out when we look at the yearly data. Just because it's easier to see it that way, what's going on the team. 10 and then 18 receptions. 18 receptions in 6 games, though. Like, I don't go per game, bro. Except for points. But it's very clear he upped his receiving usage that final year. It's not a great prolific receiver or anything. I wouldn't expect him to be dousing cornerbacks or nothing, running a lot of routes. But I mean, he was at least developed a larger receiving role pretty clearly in that second year. Yeah, 211 receiving yards as well versus 87 with only 8 more receptions. Yeah, he was doing something a little different. But then again, that first year, I already know he wasn't really playing much at all. He wasn't running back 1 or 2, so that might be just what he would have done if he had played more years. That second year is the truth. And again, we typically look at best year for running backs. Anyway, 35%. Okay. I haven't released this tab broadly yet. It's got stats lined up by season instead of broken down by age like I typically have. I find it useful, but I haven't found a lot of interest. But therefore I haven't perfected the format of it yet, so I haven't released it in general. But I like looking at it year over year because you can see the same players on the same team, basically, and roughly how it's all working together, how the pieces fit together, kind of a thing. In 2018 we got that Trey Sermon thing. Rhamondre Stevenson joins in 2019 when Trey Sermon's already gone. What happens here? Go look at... He looks like he's actually the running back too in terms of opportunity. Yeah, but he only gets like 12% of the rushing opportunities. Kenny Brooks takes it all. I think Kenny Brooks might be interesting. But still, all these percentages are low. Okay, this might just be an Oklahoma thing now. Like, last 3 years, no running backs run away with it. How long ago? I guess it was probably, right, DeMarco Murray, the last time anyone ran away with a lot of opportunity. I mean, when's the last time they had anyone over 40%? Remember that running backs in their best and last seasons typically average around 60-70% of opportunities, let alone rushing attempts. Like... Okay, this team's pretty addicted to a committee. 49% is the highest since 2013. I mean, Joe Mixon... Let's look at Joe. Yeah, 2016's Joe's last year. Good old Joe. And he doesn't get over 33%. And he was pretty... Of attempts, that is. But he got 40% of the yards. I'm just trying to get a general idea. Yeah, this might be an Oklahoma thing. At least in recent history, their best... And Mixon was a seriously... At least, no matter how it's felt to have him in your league, he was a decent prospect, I maintain. So yeah, that's good to know that... Good old Rhamondre Stevenson's last year, we shouldn't ding him too hard. What did he get to? 25% through 6 games. He's definitely... His first year is definitely remarkably different, where he's only a 12% rushing attempt player. Back to the receiving yards and receiving usage. I mean, he's barely getting used here. And there's such a drastic increase in receiving usage that, and we typically lean best year anyway. I think we can just ignore 2018, to be honest. 2020, honestly, this is a lot of yards. This is a large usage for Oklahoma in its recent history. Only through 6 games. It's a little low, but it's different overall usage. I mean, the reason is here, TJ Pledger, he's getting 23%, as opposed to, Rhamondre's 12% when he was a running back too. So is this a matter of Pledger being better or Stevenson not breaking away? That's not a great look, to be honest. But let's see. I like the fact he increases receiving usage. Okay, so what are you looking at? Here are the advanced stats. So the stats I look at most often, so they're the only one I've plugged in. This is weighted yards per team attempt. That's something I like to look at for running backs as opposed to yards per team pass attempt, which is this one, and yards per team attempt, which is that third column along. So that's what you're looking at. And let's just get rid of 2019. So this is the most interesting one, or the one I look at the most for running backs, and that 2.63 is actually pretty impressive, to be honest. And to give us some perspective on that, compared to players on his team, that's 1.15 yards above the running back average for this team in that year, with 30 touches or more, and it's 1.49 over the conference average that year, 30 touches or more. So that's how these averages are working. So that's pretty impressive. He's been remarkably efficient on a per-touch basis compared to running backs in his own conference. Even if his usage is a little low, it's definitely split. And where he grew in that receiving role, it's specifically his rushing role that got taken away from. Because, TJ Pledger, which is such a running back name, Pledger. That's a good solid name right there. But anyway, he got 23%, and even Seth McGowan, which it sounds like more of a wide receiver name, but this is an analytics, Pete. Stop it. Still. Yeah, that's a 3-way split for 63% of the opportunity. And again, looking back through the team history, we saw they do that, but it's not nearly that drastic, right? Well, 2017, it's something like that when Rodney Anderson was on the team, but Rodney Anderson wasn't pretty great. I mean, he was a decent prospect. 37% of the yards, which again is significantly higher than Stevenson. I know, man. He didn't co-opt enough of the usage for me to say dominant, big-bodied, like a guy that big in his year. And that was his year, very clearly. They brought him up from JUCO. He's been 12% rushing attempts, running back 2, and then Kenny Brooks. Was he injured or something that year? Because he's declaring this year. Either way, Kenny Brooks was not available last year. I'm assuming that's more 2020 fun. So this was his year, and he hasn't pulled away an opportunity and didn't produce as much of the team yardage as running backs do when they're the running back 1, even for Oklahoma. That's concerning to me for a dominant, big, powerful runner. 22 years old, worth knowing. He's going to be an older running back in this class again. An older running back with a lower than expected touch floor instead of an older running back with almost too many touches, which is kind of the feature of this class. There's very few that actually fit the mold of age and a certain amount of touches before they enter the NFL this year. And it's basically Jamal Jefferson and the other JJ, whose name escapes me right now. So he's a little bit of an interesting case because he's coming in older, but he's going to have less touches than most running backs if you care about that kind of thing. I know, I'm concerned about the fact he wasn't able to pull away like even Oklahoma running backs are from Pledger and Gowan, But I'm not going to hold it against him too much. It was 6 games in 2020. He played 6 games. Oh, wait, Oklahoma played more games than that. Shoot, do better research. I'm going to have to dig into what happened last year with Oklahoma in 2020 a little bit more because Pledger's playing 9 games. Seth McGowan's playing 7. Okay. I need to know why he only played 6 compared to Pledger playing 9. And that's probably accounting for the fact he hasn't pulled away more significantly in terms of opportunities. All right. So that's good to know. I know. I think he's interesting. His size and coming from Oklahoma might get him, what, third, fourth round draft capital? Like, the NFL is always, I think, going to be looking for. There's enough there to say he's a good runner. I definitely think he's a good runner. Want to dig into it more, but his yards per team pass attempt, or weighted yards per team attempt is what it's called. It's actually adjusted yards per team attempt, just to get a little nerdy with you. But Anthony Amico is the one who told me to take a look at it, and he calls it weighted, so I consider it his, and I'll use his name. But it's actually adjusted because he's adjusting it for receptions, and there's slightly extra points given for receptions. That to me is adjusted, but whatever. Yeah, a big-bodied back coming from Oklahoma, who's shown significant efficiency in that last year, even with 6 games. Like, his on-pace stats, which I usually stay away from, keeping out of metrics, and if they don't play enough games, there's not enough to judge, but it's really the only season we have from Stevenson, so if I'm going to do a little jiggling, I'd say it looked like he was going to do what good running backs do in Oklahoma, but it has been a while since Oklahoma's produced a good running back, and even longer since they've produced a good running back who's done anything significant in the NFL. Joe Mixon's been okay. Rodney Anderson got, what was it? He's one of the ones on the back end of the Cincinnati depth chart we had some interest in. Actually, right behind Joe Mixon, now I think about it. I didn't realize they were on the same team. Yeah, interesting, 6th round pick. So yeah, honestly, Stevenson probably fits the mold better of 2020 as Jalen Waddle. He's someone who shows some interesting numbers for the amount he was able to play. Slightly bigger camera. Yeah, he's someone who shows some interest, but didn't really play enough for us to really get a sense of how much of the opportunity he was able to co-opt from himself, even though Oklahoma seems to have more of a limited ceiling to touches and opportunities for running backs over the recent history compared to most other teams based on that average of 60 and 70% in best and last year. So yeah, he probably didn't play enough that I can do a lot with his stats, but a big body back who shows some level of efficiency. That receiving usage was interesting. It doesn't cross the Zach Reed meridian or the Zach Reed rule of getting 20 receptions in multiple seasons. That's the way Zach likes to look at it. But one way I like to look at it is just the percentage of his yards that came from the receiving game. And remember, this is in a shortened season, 6 games. For some reason that I don't know yet, 79% of his yards came from the rushing game, and that's a hefty percentage of his yards, for running backs at least, coming from the receiving game. Like, again, top 12 running backs randomly, for example, it's at the top of the column there, they average 86%, and so that's an extra 6-7% of yards coming from the receiving game. Again, it's only 6 games, so that's kind of a per game multiplication division stat, and I tend to stay away from them, but I've done more research on that for wide receiver, so I can't even tell you, for sure that we should avoid it for running back, but I'm pretty confident I won't be using it a lot. He's kind of a player. I appreciate his size. He's definitely got a skill set. I don't know the full level of his skill set, because that's a large rushing percentage of his yards coming from the receiving game, but a very low receiving usage with only 18 receptions. But that was in 6 games, so maybe he's got that 3-down skill set. I don't think the NFL is going to know. I don't think we know. I think the NFL is going to see a really big guy who's pretty efficient at rushing from Oklahoma, who they're less interested in now these days anyway. But it's a really thin class. So I'm going to take the size. Right, the NFL is going to NFL. They're going to use a guy if they can. Find a role, have him around, use him if an opportunity comes up. And with that, his size alone probably nets him more expectation of opportunity if he can find a depth chart somewhere, And I do like the fact that we already know that he's someone who's had these setbacks and had to earn his own, go out and specifically by himself do something to earn another opportunity, and he's paid off twice. I kind of like that about him in this situation. But we'll have to see what the draft thinks. It's a very thin class. I really think it's a thin class. I don't know what that's going to do to draft capital. Maybe they'll draft a few that are good even higher than usual, or they'll let them all fall a little bit. But it's going to be interesting to see what they think of Stevenson, and that's pretty much all I'm going to have to go on. What film grinders say about him, and that he's fairly efficient, was developing a receiving role at least in 6 games, and has the size, has the kind of size that the NFL could really find a use for. Yeah, outside of that, without draft capital, I'm not overly interested. But I think he's going to get some level of it, and there's enough there that he can hang around on the back of a few depth charts, you know? I hate to say that for a guy who's continually had to prove himself over and over again. I don't... There's not a lot of buzz about him. I don't want to be the guy saying, I'll prove it again, like he just proved it to everyone twice, going from high school, having to go to JUCO, and then again being good enough to get elevated into the actual FSB. Both those times he was asked to prove it, and he was. So I don't want to be that guy in the NFL. Thankfully with Flavor, there's not a lot of talk about him, hype, to boost his value in our rookie drafts. I don't think the NFL's going to spend too much draft capital here. But he, especially in a thin class, he's the type of player I want to keep my eye on. That's first look. That's where I'm at. Let me know what you think. I know. Like, that's where I'm at. That's what I can see just glancing through his stats. I'll dig through them a little more on my own, obviously, and I want to know why he only played 6 games, because other players in Oklahoma played more than that. I don't actually know that about Oklahoma. I just thought they had a shortened season, and that was why. And, yeah, let's see what the draft brings, I guess. Anyway, thanks for checking out. If you did, if you didn't, I can't say anything to you because you're not here, so that was a weird thing to say. Anyway, really appreciate it. Check you out next time. Let me know if there's another player or something, or some other element to these videos that I should add. And, yeah, appreciate it, guys. Thanks very much. See you next time. That's it. I got nothing. Happy, healthy self. Keep grinding. That kind of thing, guys. Enjoy it. Thanks. Bye.
Do you have the time to listen to me grind?